3, 2, 1.
Welcome in, Husker Extra Podcast, episode number 201. I'm Chris. There's Parker. There's Steve.
Is this the Lincoln Journal-Star Sports podcast now, or is it the Husker Extra?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, an as yet to be determined name for our podcast.
Podcast to be named later.
Podcast to be named later. We'll call it
the Nomads.
We'll call us the Nomads. We're in 3 different locations right now, the 3 of us. It is 3:21 p.m. on Thursday, August 12th. We are halfway through fall camp for the football team. 2 weeks from Saturday is the season opener against Illinois. We're 16 days out, which means we're 15 days out from the first road trip together in 2 years. I am jacked up about that. It's going to be awesome, but we'll talk about that at another time.
We can talk about that later.
Yeah. We're just kind of going to take stock here halfway through camp, what we've heard, what we've seen. Media have been able to observe the first half hour or so of 2 practices so far. So we've gotten to see a lot of stretching and light jogging.
Lots of stretching. And, we talked to offensive coaches yesterday, Mario Verduzco, Ryan Held. And Ryan Held, I thought, was notable because he talked about, he was asked, race for the number 1 running back. How's that going? Sets down to 4 guys. Wouldn't name those 4 guys. Coincidentally, there were 3 of those guys. There were 3 running backs brought up to speak to the media yesterday. Marquis Stepp, Gabe Irvin, and help me.
Sevion
Morrison. Thank you. Those were the 3. So you have to figure those 3 are probably not at the bottom of the depth chart. Those 3 are probably in the 4 that Ryan Held is talking about.
Good detective work, Baz.
That'd be quite a curveball if 2 of those 3 were out of contention.
Should we go ahead, Baz?
No, I was just going to say it would be funny if they just trot out like Cooper Jewett for the first snap at Illinois. They call him the starter, and after not bringing him out.
Cooper can run. He's fast
dude. All right,
so they making lattes over there or what, Sipple?
Okay, so we should say what the deal is. I'm going to be working from scooters most of the next couple months, so I hope people in scooters are okay. I'm trying not to talk too loud. I'm naturally loud, but and if it looks a little odd and you hear people in the background, I'm at scooters.
Yeah.
Can I say that, by the way? Can I say that?
Yeah, it's fine. You just did.
Sure.
It's fine.
Free shout out. Sponsor us.
Yeah, Scooters sponsor the podcast to be named later. We should. A lot of you probably know this. We're moving out. The Journal Star is moving out of its current location at 9th and P. Friday is our last day to officially be in the building. We have to be out by Friday tomorrow. So we'll be, we're waiting for our new space to get built out. We'll be all working from various locations around Lincoln, whether that's in scooters, whether that's in our homes or various other locales. This is something we often joked about on the road. We'd like to cover a football game from a different location than the football game is actually being played. So like covering the Oklahoma game from Indianapolis Motor Speedway. We've joked about that.
Yeah, we're doing it. We got to do it. It'd be so much fun.
This is basically a trial run of that. So we're doing our Journal Star podcast, not at the Journal Star is what it comes down to. So just bear with us for next couple.
It'll for sure be entirely smooth and not without kinks.
Yeah, as the previous 200 episodes have been.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway,
kind of fun.
We got off topic there. Let's talk some running backs. I guess just your thoughts. I guess, and again, you only see so much in these practices, but just what you've seen in these workouts, what you've heard from coaches, from players. How do you guys kind of see the running back race shaping up as we enter the 2 weeks?
Go ahead, fire away, Parker. I'll add in.
Yeah, I think on Wednesday, so yesterday as we're recording this, we were over there for a half hour early in practice, and we're going to talk more as sort of like the midpoint breakdown of where Nebraska's at. Part of the story at this point is who's not involved, and a couple tight ends and Turner Corcoran. We're going to talk about that a little later in the podcast. But one of the most interesting sights I thought of practice was the first time, and it was just walkthrough, right? It wasn't live. It wasn't one offense versus one defense, but the first time the number 1 offense lined up on the first snap of a walkthrough period early in practice, Sevion Morrison was the running back. with that group. I just thought that was an interesting sight. And I think it's pretty clear that he and Irvin and Marquis Stepp, the three guys that we talked to yesterday, are the three best candidates for the starting role. Now, there's one more. We're not sure who that is out of Jaquez Yant, Ramir Johnson, and Marvin Scott. Held, so they're down to 4. Those are the other 3 guys that are on scholarship. But I just think I'm interested in all 3 of them for obvious reasons, because they're 3 that are in contention, but because they each have sort of taken an interesting route to this spot. Gabe Irvin's is the shortest. He just got to campus in January, or the smoothest, I guess you would say. He just got to campus in January. He impressed from the day he got here. He turned heads in the spring. He has the build of sort of an every down back. He's a little bit slighter than Marquis Stepp, but simple. I mean, you saw him yesterday. He's not slight.
Gabe Irvin? No.
Listed 6 foot 215, probably bigger than that now since
he seems bigger.
Yeah.
And then if he walked into Scooters and you said, if Gabe Irvin walked in here, and I wouldn't have known who he was, and you said he's an inside linebacker, I would have just nodded my head and said, "Oh yeah, that makes sense." Go ahead.
Yeah, so no. So he's just kind of come in and turned heads and made an impression right away. Marquis Stepp was in the process of doing that, except for then he got hurt the second day of spring ball. He's had foot injuries over his 3 seasons at USC, and then bounced back from it quicker, I think, than the coaching staff was expecting, and has put together, by all accounts, a solid preseason camp here over the last 2 weeks. And then Savion Morrison, in some ways, I almost want to say he's the most interesting storyline of the 3, because last year, he was highly touted when he came in. He was a top 250 type recruit, 4-star guy, broke Spencer Tillman's record in high school in Tulsa, Oklahoma, rushed for 5,000 yards. And it's just
not in one season.
Yeah, not in one season, but as in his career in Oklahoma. And then he wasn't in great shape. Ryan Held and Matt Lubick talked about him sort of like having to get his off-field habits just in terms of diet and sleep in sort of under control. And he's come back. He got in really good shape this summer, and he's come back this camp. And he's putting a best foot forward and making a charge toward the starting job. So it's a race that's full of unknowns. And I don't want our listeners, I think our listeners are pretty smart, I don't want them to conflate it being fascinating with there being a lot of hype. Like, I don't know how good any of them are going to be. Maybe they'll all be really
hard to
good.
know.
Maybe they'll all be mediocre. Who knows? We'll find that part out. But I just think the race itself is very interesting with the guys that are involved.
Yeah, I think they've done a good job of it. I like that they filled the room with bigger guys. I like that right away. Now, not that Savion Morrison's all that big. He's definitely the thinner of the 3.
Yeah, but he's 6 foot and 2. He's listed at 6
he's not
foot
small.
210. So if that's your small running back, that's all right.
Hey, what did it was sort of interesting what he said about the sleep aspect. He said he feels like a whole new person since he started going to bed at 9:30 instead of staying up all night playing video games.
God, I should try that.
Yeah, well, it was interesting to listen to him. It is a very common sense discussion, but he said he characterized it as life changing.
Yeah, it was very interesting. Go ahead, Simon.
Yeah. He gets up out of bed and feels way better. He feels ready for the day instead of just kind of sleepwalking into the day. Young dad, Chris Basnick, can understand that.
Yeah, certainly. It's interesting too, because one of the things he said, the other thing I thought that he said that was really interesting. Well, one, he said he noticed the change so quickly when he started going to bed earlier that it was easy for him to follow through and continue doing that because he saw the results like almost immediately. And then the other thing is, I thought it was really interesting. He said that he really, Ryan Held was pretty straightforward with him about what he needed to do. You need to get in shape. You need to get your body right. And getting your body right is going to help you keep from getting injured. Being healthy, sleeping a lot, eating right is injury prevention in its own right, as well as development. And so he said that Ryan Held showed him the transformation that Devine Ezigbo made when Ezigbo committed to changing his body and the results that followed on the field. And Sevion Morrison yesterday was like, I saw that, and I recognized that Coach Held was asking me to do the same thing he asked Devine to do. And I was like, well, if that guy got those results, I can do the same thing. So it just seems, I mean, it's hard, right? I mean, people, you go on a diet or you get in a good habit or whatever. And it's one thing to be excited about it and do it for a while. And it's another thing to turn it into what you do every single day, month after month, year after year. But he sounded like a kid who had figured out something about what it takes to be a good college football player. And now we'll just see how far he can take it.
So are we saying the fourth guy you think is Marvin? Did you say you think it's Marvin Scott?
I would lean that way just because I thought he had a nice spring. He was available a lot in the spring and not a lot of guys were. He rushed for 80 yards in the spring game. I know Ryan Held was complimentary of the work he'd done speed-wise over the summer, but I also don't know that you can discount number 4 being big number 0, Jaquez Yant, in sort of the short yardage goal line, maybe more of like a role or package player than those other 3. I don't know. I don't know. I don't even know that I have, maybe you have a better feel for it, Simple. I don't know that I have a great guess as to what even they have in mind for the 4th guy.
I think this is it's an important discussion because I don't know. Like what Marquis Stepp said yesterday about USC's offense being flamboyant and for prima. I don't know what he said. He said it was a flamboyant offense for what? What did he say? Were you there?
Well, he was comparing it to. Sorry,
yeah,
Parker, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Baz.
He was asked to compare Nebraska's offense to USC's offense, and he said, and I need to go back and listen to it. He said Nebraska's offense was grittier. He said that it was more run oriented, more power.
He said, and I quote, they're trying to get that shit going downhill.
Yeah,
he said that.
Yeah, so isn't that significant?
Yeah. And look at what they did against Rutgers last year. They got that shit going downhill and they piled up 620 yards of offense. So you wonder if there's maybe a shift towards more of that.
That's what I'm getting at. I mean, I wonder if there's a Sunday column in there that is there a transformation going on over there that I'm not fully aware of? Or did you guys just figure that was happening?
I didn't necessarily figure that, but it makes sense, right? Like they've got some experience back on the offensive line, even though it's young guys. You've got a big, strong quarterback who you need to keep healthy because you don't have a lot of proven depth behind him. You've got what looks like decent depth at running back. You've got what looks like receivers that can block for you.
I think you've got a defense.
We'll
get to that. Yeah, it looks like you might have 2 tight ends maybe that can do a lot of stuff for you.
And you've got a defense that can hold up in the West, right? I mean,
yes.
You think a defense that can go toe-to-toe with this style of offenses, more or less, that you're going to see in the Big Ten West.
The evidence is pointing towards Nebraska shifting that way, or pointing towards the fact that it would not be a surprise if Nebraska shifted that way.
Well, the other piece of evidence is Frost is talking about the running back position. He said he wants a defined guy who can carry a heavy load. I mean, he has said it publicly. So if I were to write something, I'd just say, look at what Frost said, look what Stepp said, look at the personnel. I think there's a shift going on, which people I think would love if that's the case. But I think the question is, would Frost commit to it? Would he stay with it? That's the question. Because think about it, guys. What happened against Minnesota last year? It was a game that was set up for a downhill running game, and they didn't do it.
Just didn't do it at all.
Yeah, he just decided against it.
And it wasn't in the plan. I mean, they remember that week, Sipple. I mean, that he said after the game essentially that their game plan was to try to throw it all over him.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. He didn't back off. He didn't back off on the fact he had the wrong game plan. It was interesting to me how passionately he defended a bad game plan. I mean, it wasn't a good game plan. I think Frost would tell you that today. It was a bad game plan.
Yeah.
They were down. Remember, they brought with them Minnesota. How many? I think they brought 4 defensive linemen with them.
Yeah, they had 33 players out.
Yeah, why wouldn't you just try to bulldoze them?
Great
I know it's
question.
hindsight. It's sort of chicken shit for me to do that because it's really hindsight, but it wasn't really hindsight during the season though.
No, I mean, I don't
Sorry
think there was
about
a
the
lot.
language.
There weren't a lot of people. There weren't a lot of people at halftime of that game, watching on TV or sitting in the press box or, whatever, listening on the radio saying, oh, I know why they're throwing it all over the place today, why they're not running. Of course, no, there weren't, I mean, it's hindsight. It's easy to say now, but you said it that day too. So I think it's fair.
Yeah. So anyway, that all points to maybe a bit of a shift in the way they approach their offense.
Yeah, and what a part of that shift too, and we touched on this, is what they might do or not do with the tight ends on the roster, and that's suddenly become a pretty big question mark for this team at the most recent open practice this week. Austin Allen didn't participate. Travis Vokalek wasn't there. So that's 2 guys that have been praised pretty heavily for several weeks now by this coaching staff, and 2 guys that have been talked about as key parts of what Nebraska's going to have going forward. So now I don't know if you call it concerns or worries, but there's certainly some question marks. Yeah, it's certainly trending towards concern if it isn't there already, but it's something that's going to become and maybe we'll hear more from Scott Frost tomorrow morning when he speaks with the media, but it's certainly something that needs to be addressed here soon.
Parker, what would you say right now about Travis Vokalek's injury situation?
Well, I think the biggest thing for me on that is we don't know exactly, what the extent of it is. But one telltale sign I thought yesterday in the open practice was that a freshman walk-on, Evan Meyersick, was going through the acclimation period. He was just in helmets and shoulder pads, not in full pads like the rest. But that means they took a tight end. He plays tight end. They took a tight end off the camp roster and put one on. So if you're taking a guy off the camp roster, you're probably not expecting him to be back in camp. So between the two, I think Vokalek is the better candidate for a guy that they're expecting to miss some time. Now we'll see, that's reading tea leaves a little bit. That's not saying categorically, hey, he's out, 4 weeks or 6 weeks or whatever. We'll see what Scott Frost is willing to say about Travis Vokalek's situation tomorrow when he talks. But the fact that they elevated somebody, so for people that don't know, Nebraska has 116 players on its camp roster. It's normally 110, but you've got the 6-year guys back, so it's 116. The guys that are not on the camp roster, they can't participate until school starts. So, but they're around. They went through summer workouts and all that. So when somebody gets hurt, if they're going to miss extensive time, Nebraska you can move someone off the camp roster because of an injury and elevate someone onto the camp roster to take his place. The simple fact that, they need bodies at tight end. Austin Allen and Travis Vokalek weren't there on Wednesday. Thomas Fidoni's been out, obviously, towards ACL in April. There was another guy, Nate Borkircher from Aurora, was out yesterday. But simply speaking, the fact that they elevated a walk-on to the camp roster at tight end, the tea leaves tell you that Travis Vokalek, most likely between the two, they're expecting him to miss at least, more than a few days. Like they're expecting him to miss a considerable amount of time.
And why do I say it's concerning? Because Vokalek is, first of all, they regarded tight end as a position of strength. If not, I would just say it's their strongest position on offense.
Yeah.
And now if you remove one of them and Vokalek's one of them, if Vokalek's the one, he's one of the best blockers on the team. In fact, I joke with him all the time that he's a right tackle. He's not. He's a good tight end and he can catch the ball, but he's a very good blocker. So, yeah, and Austin Allen's one of the best players on the team, period. So it is definitely a situation to really watch closely. because it would affect the conversation we just had too, by the way.
Yeah, it would. And you can put Turner Corcoran in that conversation too, Sipple. I mean, Nebraska's freshman left tackle who's been limited. He was at practice, unlike Austin Allen and Travis Vocalex, he was at practice. But he was doing individual work on the side, had his pads on. But again, you want to talk about telltale signs. He didn't warm up with the team. He didn't take any of the team reps even in the walkthrough period. And unlike every other offensive lineman at practice, he didn't have his ankles taped and he didn't have knee braces on. So he's just doing really light work. And when you talk about Corcoran and the two tight ends, you're talking about 3/4 of the players that play on the edge, on the line of scrimmage, on the edge for the offense. You're talking about, but those three and then Bryce Bennett, the right tackle, are the keys to running anything from mid zone and out. Like obviously guards and centers are important too. But you're talking about guys who you're planning on setting the edge, who you're planning on, handling a lot of the blocking work in the run game. And it's not like, I think it's concerning. Obviously, I don't think it's time to panic. They don't play for 16 days. That's time, even a 4-week injury, you're talking about half the distance between not 4 weeks from now, there's no games. So it's better than it happening October 1st, obviously.
Yes.
But it's concerning in part because that's a pretty good part of the engine block right there. Those two positions are, that's not those aren't the flame decals on the side of the sports car. That's the engine, that's the important part.
I like flame decals, but you're right. And then maybe it goes without saying, but Turner Corcoran's a redshirt freshman.
Yeah, he's a true freshman. Yeah,
he's a true freshman. Yeah, technically a true freshman. And August is a critical time. The first part of August is a critical time for development, for sure. And he's just been a critical time in his life in terms of player development was kind of taken away. So it's not, and I don't think those things are small. I mean, I used to kind of gloss over those, but there's just not that much time for kids to get better. And when it's wiped away like that at such a critical time, it's not anything to take lightly, in my opinion.
Well, and you're talking about a kid that saw his first season here have some pretty serious interruptions too with COVID. And you talk about development time, and you think, well, okay, it's back normal this fall. I'm going to be able to develop and get coached. And then now he's not. Now he's off to the side. So it's kind of a double whammy there, Sip, with what you were talking about.
Yeah, and this is a kid, by the way, Parker. Who'd he turn down besides Oklahoma? He came to Nebraska as he's very highly recruited.
Yeah, Oklahoma and Ohio State, I think, were the two main contenders. Yeah, besides Nebraska. Yeah.
Well, speaking of Turner Corcoran, any other offensive line curiosities you guys want to discuss? Anything you've seen?
Yeah, a lot of curiosities. I mean,
well, let's go.
Let's go. I mean, you have probably a new right. Well, you're going to have a new starting right guard, Matt Siechterman, which is, that's an unknown. Ethan Piper is a young player at the other guard position that has to, needs to make improvement. Left tackle now, you don't know. I mean, Parker, you're saying Brant Banks might move into that if need be.
Yeah, interestingly, in the spring, it was Nori Noeli was sort of like the second line, but I think that was in part because Brant Banks and Matt Siechterman were really battling for the right guard job. So if we pencil Siechterman in as the right guard, that frees up Brant Banks, who's a redshirt freshman who they like a lot, to sort of be the swing tackle. So yesterday at practice, Wednesday at practice, Banks was first up with the number one offensive line at left tackle, and then Noeli also got some first team run. So those are your two options at left tackle in the event that Turner Corcoran, misses any game time. That seems like the pecking order there.
Boy, we are in the middle of camp talk.
That's right.
We're deep in it.
Yeah, those things are all very important.
We're stepping right in some camp talk.
Yeah. High stepping into
the end zone
camp
at
talk,
the end of a
backup
60-yard
quarterbacks.
touchdown.
I don't have any kind of handle on how those backup quarterbacks are progressing because we don't see practice. But I do know this. My God, Heinrich Harburg is a sight. I mean, that's a big man walking up there in front of
That's a big fella. True freshman.
God.
Carved out of granite.
How that? Yeah, that's just he's a physical freak.
Mario made this comparison. He was talking about how different sized quarterbacks have to generate velocity, have to find ways to be good in different ways, right? And he said, think about it this way: John Elway was always going to have more natural velocity on the ball than Joe Montana was, because John Elway was a big dude and Montana wasn't really. And Sam McEwen from the World Herald said, so in this example, Heinrich Harburg is John Elway, right? Which if you would have just walked into the conversation, you'd have been like, what the hell is going on? But it did make sense. And Mario smiled, and he was not going to put those two in the same sentence. But he said Heinrich's a big dog now. So, and that's true. You know, he walks in the room.
Yeah, he could also said Ryan Leaf was a big quarterback too, and he threw 36 picks against 14 touchdowns.
You sure he didn't throw 72 touchdowns?
What's that?
Sure
No, he didn't.
72 touchdowns.
That was my guess on Shut Up Sipple. Yeah, Ryan Leaf threw 14 touchdown passes and 36 picks. I'm not picking on him. That's not just.
Well, he didn't do that at Washington State though. Like he did that in the NFL. Like we don't need Heinrich Harburg to be thrown in against NFL defenses right now. He needs to be able to throw against college.
No, I got it.
Point taken. Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is interesting. The physical tool set Sipple's really compelling with Harburg. And again, like I say, that doesn't mean it's going to turn into anything necessarily, but they just sort of drool over the possibility. And there's work to be done, obviously. But you heard Frost. I mean, it's a continuation of what Scott said in the spring, that they weren't going to really mess with his throwing motion much because the arm talent is special. And that they're just going to sort of let him develop. And then over the summer, I caught up with Mario at one point over the summer, and he said he put on 18 pounds since he'd been on campus. Harburg, that is, not Mario. And so that would put him at 6'5" and 210 or something like that. Verduzco yesterday sort of intimated, rough math, that he'll end up somewhere in the 6'5" or 6'6" and 230 neighborhood by the time he fills out a little bit. So he's a big kid for sure.
Didn't Mario say this too? He said part of the reason they didn't pursue a quarterback out of the transfer portal because of the way Harburg developed over the summer and picked up the offense. You know, that was probably a little bit of a concern over there, but he seemed to get in here in January, certainly helped him. He said that yesterday when he was talking to us. He said, I could go over and pick Mario's brain because they weren't getting ready for the season. It was January. He'd go over, sit in Mario's office, go over offense, signals, whatever it was, and really learn the offense, then come into fall camp, spring ball and fall camp, and be maybe more prepared than obviously he would have if he would have just shown up August 1st or whatever and only been through 10, 11 practices already. So that's part of it too.
The thing about that to remember too is, for as much as they believe in any player that they signed in that 2021 class, some of them, like, they never saw Heinrich Harburg throw the ball live until he got to campus because of COVID and because of the dead period. So spring ball, even more, it would have been anyways, but even more because of the COVID dead period, was when they had to evaluate, and they need to do this in a clear-eyed way, where is he at right now? And can we get him to a point over the next few months where we don't need to take a transfer quarterback? And that's what they decided. You know, they saw enough. And the part that Mario Verduzco followed that with yesterday was saying Frost already liked where Logan Smothers was. So the idea was they have two, Martinez and Smothers, and then this spring they learned enough about the third guy in the room who could end up being the number 2 or the number 3, but the third person in the room they learned enough about to say, okay, we feel good about this going into the fall. It still feels thin. I mean, if Adrian Martinez misses any time because of injury this year, it's going to get interesting really fast.
You never know, though. I never like to sell kids short. I mean, maybe there's a star in one of those.
Well, that would be interesting, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that would be. Yeah, I wasn't saying you were selling short, but I think everybody tends to do that because they're young. I just hope they're not thinking that way. I hope they're thinking like, yeah, well, if he gets hurt, maybe we'll be better, you know?
Yeah.
That's the way they got to think.
Yeah, it's funny because Harburg, people say that about Harburg, like, oh, well, he's 3 years or whatever, you say that, but like, I don't know. Adrian Martinez didn't play his senior year because he had reconstructive shoulder surgery. And then he got here in January and won a starting job. So who's to say that like one of those guys that it shouldn't be beyond the realm of possibility that one of those two is ready to step in and run the show if Martinez misses time for whatever
Yeah,
reason.
like remember how Graham Mertz kind of set the world on fire against Illinois? I mean, maybe you'd see something like, remember that last year? What was he completion percentage?
Well, completed his first like 18 or 19, didn't he? Or some insane number.
Yeah.
Right. Against
5
Illinois.
touchdown passes.
Right. And no, he didn't have
Imagine
that.
if Henrik Harburg came in and did that against like, Minnesota.
Against Illinois the first week of the season.
Yeah, against Illinois in the first game.
That wouldn't cause any stir around here.
My God. Can you imagine? We'd be doing emergency podcasts every day.
Well, remember at Oregon, I mean, the guy that
Emergency.
yeah, we would. That would be a daily emergency.
Do we do emergency podcasts, by the way?
We've
We might
never
have to
have
start.
done, we've never done one, but we'd start.
Yeah, that would be a reason to start.
The guy that sometimes the natural comparison to Harburg with the late evaluation and the local ties and the big arm and the athleticism at 6'5" and Frost doing the evaluating, like all of those things are a lot like what led Justin Herbert to Oregon. And again, it's not fair you're not talking about outcomes. You're talking about the starting point. The starting point looks very similar. And I mean, Justin Herbert started his freshman year 6th on the depth chart at Oregon.
Wow.
Like when the season started, he was 6th.
Wow.
And he ended up starting games for that team by the end of the year because of a combination of injuries and performance. So you never know what's going to happen, especially at quarterback.
No, can you guys hear? Is there a lot of ruckus in the background?
No.
Did you hear the blender at all?
Oh yeah, I can hear the blender now.
Yeah, we can hear the blender, but it's not bad.
What'd you order? Smoothie?
No, I got a mocha. I don't know. I haven't got this down yet. I like the cappuccino, the French vanilla sugar-free cappuccino at McDonald's, hot. But I got to get on to something here. The mocha is just okay.
I'm gonna give you guys a confession right now. I've never ordered a drink from a coffee shop in my life. Never.
Really?
Not a
You just make
smoothie,
coffee?
not a coffee. Never have gone into a coffee shop and ordered something and walked out with a drink in my hand.
Really?
How about that? 41
Drink
years
coffee?
old. Don't drink coffee.
God.
Don't drink coffee.
We're just saying, Sipple, after we had a little farewell get together here at the newsroom for the building, and I was telling Baz he went to get a Mountain Dew, and I was telling him that his tagline just in life, but maybe on his Twitter profile, needs to be "do or die."
Like DEW or die.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, I was just making sure.
like Mountain Dew, the soda.
Yeah, that's not bad. I don't want to talk about the office. It's very emotional.
It is very emotional. We're going to move on. Speaking of Mountain Dew and potential sponsorships, why don't we talk a little NIL to wrap this thing up? Very interesting development out of BYU today. A protein bar, energy bar company in Utah is going to pay tuition for all 36 of BYU's walk-on football players. And there was a video put out today kind of explaining how that would go. Kind of one of the first real big NIL related things we've seen to a football program and what could potentially happen with something like that. And it's, of course, going to be different in different states. BYU's tuition is not astronomically high because of the involvement with the church there. They can keep costs down. So it's still obviously 36 tuitions you're paying for, but kind of an interesting step in the direction we might see NIL go in the coming weeks, coming months, coming years.
So Parker, people are going to wonder about Nebraska. They're going to wonder about Nebraska. What's the deal?
Well, the thing that I keep thinking every time one of these things in the NIL realm comes into the news in a different way, shape, or form, like this, or like the guy at Miami who's just given every player on the team $5,000 a year. Like every time something like that happens, the thing that I keep thinking is every other school in the country, somebody in the walls at every other school is thinking, oh man, we don't have that.
Right.
You know, like it's, and so every time there's a creative iteration on a deal like this one, or like somebody getting a truck, or like just giving $5,000 to all 105 players on the team or whatever, around the country, the response is like, well, what are we going to do? What are we going to do about that? And if you don't find that same thing or the equivalent of it in some way, now someone else has something you don't have, which is like the thing that college coaches, that's why there's been a facilities arms race for 20 years, because nobody wants to be the program that doesn't have something that other programs have. Exactly. So I think for Nebraska, you know, the one thing we haven't really seen is we haven't seen a lot of big sort of headline grabbing deals, and we haven't seen deals like that's every walk-on at BYU. The thing at Miami is every player on Miami's team. And outside of maybe something in the works with the offensive line and a restaurant in town, there hasn't been much of that here. So one of the things I'm curious about going into the future is, and Nebraska's coaches aren't allowed to facilitate. You know, the university can't facilitate deals, which makes the group thing, you know, every player on the team, every player on the defense, guys that are in a black shirt, the quarterbacks, the offensive line, the defensive line. It makes those sort of like group type deals harder to come by, because that's not just a company. It's going to be rare that a company's going to call up and say, hey, I'm going to volunteer to do this for 150 players or for 70 players or whatever it is. So I think that's something, I know it's something that they're working on over there, but it's definitely something I think you'll see continue to develop in only Nebraska.
So we have to explain something to the people. So you glossed over it, but the university cannot set up a deal like that.
Right. Yeah. No, they cannot.
Obviously the coaches can't, but the university can't.
Right.
It would have to be an outlet that has ties to the university that could do it. But those entities aren't, I don't know, they're not even created, right?
Right.
Not yet.
I mean, you could have a
exactly
not yet. Right. Yeah. I mean, you could have an agent, you know, like if I'm just using a random example. Like if Cam Jurgens had an agent, a marketing agency, he could say, look, I want you to go find me a big deal with a car dealership for me and all the boys in the offensive line. And that would be something that you could, like, if you had, you'd have to hire someone to proactively go find that deal. I mean,
and they get a cut.
Obviously. Yeah.
But
that's not, it would take an awful lot of creativity for a local business to just get the idea in their head of, hey, what if we gave the secondary, some sort of, I don't even know what it would be, you know, it's like, a deal that's about a targeted group of players or every men's basketball player or something like that. It's going to have to be something that comes from the player end. The player end just can't be the university. I don't think I'd say Nebraska is starting to fall behind quite yet, but I would, if I were a Nebraska, like if I were Scott Frost, my tentacles would be up right now. You don't want to fall too far behind. They have the deal. Nebraska has the deal with open doors, but the way it's been characterized to me is that's one track. That's the social media track. This is an example of, this isn't a social media track at all. What's happening at BYU? That's just a business. That's a business. Yeah, 100%.
And there's about 5 or 6 tracks that you can run on in this. Nebraska's got to get to running on some more tracks now.
Well, and you said not fall behind. What's the thing that Nebraska has pumped about this from the beginning? We're on the cutting edge. We're out ahead of everybody. We're the innovators. Well, now,
I don't know.
Are you?
Yeah.
After you see what's happening at BYU, are you really that far
Miami,
ahead of everybody else? Miami,
Ohio State,
Wisconsin.
Yeah, I don't know what Wisconsin's doing, Parker.
O-line.
I don't know.
Is there
Oh
something?
yeah,
on
their
O-line?
O-line. Yeah, Graham Mertz got their offensive line some sort of deal. I don't know much about it though.
At like a barbecue restaurant or something.
Yeah,
like
that's
that.
right.
But still,
That's right.
still.
All right, boys, it's budget meeting time here.
Yep, time for us to wrap it up
at the newsroom. So I gotta bolt here from the conference.
Yep. Thanks all for tuning in. That's episode 201. We'll talk to you guys from another remote location next week. Thanks for tuning in.